My Aunt Kay was in her early 20s in the 1980s. This was before she married my uncle, when she would drive long distances back and forth between her parents and my uncles to visit. It was a transitional period for them. He had just graduated, and she hadn't moved out yet to be with him. It was a long drive across several states through the desert, which took her hours. This desolate highway would have stretches of road that lasted hundreds of miles, where you quite often wouldn't see another driver, let alone a gas station. So Aunt Kay set out and began one of those journeys. A couple hours into the drive, she noticed a dark vehicle slowly catching up to her. She barely noticed as she continued to sing along to the Les Mis soundtrack until the vehicle got aggressively close. She turned off the music and looked into her rearview mirror, seeing the vehicle flash its brights and a hand pointing at her car and motioning for her to pull over. Alarmed, she quickly slowed down and began to look for a good place to pull off the road and see what must be wrong with her car. The second she began to pull off the road, she heard as clear as day a voice say,
"Don't pull over."
Then again,
"Don't pull over."
Whether it was a guardian angel or just a gut feeling, a jolt of adrenaline and fear shot through her body as she hit the gas and peeled back out onto the highway. Heart pumping, Aunt Kay silently asked herself what the hell was that, as she saw the vehicle peel out behind her. The dark vehicle continued to closely follow, flashing their brights and motioning for her to pull over. Fear and confusion overwhelmed her as Aunt Kay began to question what was going on. Why was the driver motioning for her to pull over? Was there something wrong with her car? And what the hell was that warning she felt or heard? This was before cell phones, and it would have been a severe situation if her car broke down out there, but she had no choice but to press on. Just as her resolve wavered, the dark vehicle picked up speed. It entered the oncoming traffic lane and came level with my aunt's car. The driver smiled, pointed, motioned and mouthed the words, "Pull over," to my aunt. She said the second she looked into his eyes, she felt pure evil. She felt a horribly sick feeling in the pit of her stomach and again heard the words in her head,
"Don't pull over."
She described him as looking scary and greasy, with a smile that she'll never forget. It sent chills through her. This quickly dispelled any thoughts she had of pulling over, and she put the pedal to the metal to try to lose him. He chased after her. When she slowed down, he slowed down. If she sped up, he did too. It got to the point that he began to try to push her car off the road. Aunt Kay was at the point of tears as this creep continued to terrorize her out in the middle of nowhere. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she saw a couple of semi-trucks off in the distance. She felt that if she could get closer to them or even between those trucks, she would be safe, so she took off. He continued flashing his lights, honking his horn and trying to hit her car until she was close enough to the trucks. As she got in between them, she saw the dark vehicle slow way down, eventually disappearing from view. She stayed with those trucks for a couple hours until she felt safe enough to pull over at a gas station and cry. Many years later, my aunt and uncle are married. He's working at a law firm as a high-profile criminal prosecutor in Las Vegas. She's now a full-time mom of several young children. Since I've known my aunt, she's been obsessed with true crime. Dateline, 2020, Unsolved Mysteries, they're always playing at her house. This day was no different. She was folding laundry in the kitchen while listening to the TV in the other room. The interviewer was talking about a man who was being interviewed on death row. As she paired another match of socks, she heard the man describe one of his tactics for procuring victims. According to him, he would wait along the side of the highway. When a car would go by with a family, he'd wait. Another car with a male driver would go by and he'd wait. But every so often, a car would go by with a pretty young woman driving alone. So he'd pull out and follow them, flashing his brights, honking and motioning for him to pull over. Aunt Kay, paralyzed, continued to listen. When they would eventually pull over, he would tell them there was something wrong with the car, telling them to pop the hood so he could help them. When they did, he'd yank out a few wires, disabling the car. "No problem," he'd say. "My buddy has a shop in the next town. I'll give you a ride, and he'll give you a good deal." My aunt slowly moved to the living room, and when they'd get in his car, he'd have his way with them, and then dispose of them somewhere in the desert. When they asked how many times he did this, he responded, "Too many times to count. They'll never find all the bodies." Then they asked if anybody ever got away. The man paused and said, "2 or 3. My aunt stood alone, staring into the same toothless grin she saw on that highway that day. It was the face of Henry Lee Lucas, also known as the Confession Killer. This happened about 13 years ago, when I was a sophomore in college, attending a liberal arts school in New York. Within the first month or two of freshman year, I had found myself in a very tight-knit group of fellow theater geeks. 6 guys, myself included, and 1 girl. And they all loved horror movies and ghost stories. I had found my crew. Freshman year was tough, but we all held each other up and made the whole experience more enjoyable for one another. At the beginning of sophomore year, we decided that in October, as the Halloween season was ramping up, we would drive out to a creepy wooded spot in a nearby town for camping some night and scare the crap out of ourselves. We did some research and found that there was a particularly isolated area about 30 minutes away, infamous for paranormal sightings. Perfect. The 7 of us split into 2 different cars and headed out into the night. Allow me to set the scene. You turn off a busy main road, flooded with strip malls and restaurants and whatnot, and you are almost immediately greeted by complete darkness. Again, this area was very heavily wooded. It was essentially a large web of winding roads surrounded by trees. Very few streetlights and very few houses. Without a GPS or a good sense of direction, one could easily get lost in there. We all made sure to have fully charged phones and flashlights just in case, but the goal was to keep driving until we collectively decided to pull over and go exploring. So following the directions, we made a left off the main road, driving for 30 minutes or so into this dark network, picking directions at random, just getting intentionally lost. Our cars made a turn and, to our surprise, there was a huge log in front of us. We had reached a dead end of some kind, with nothing but trees beyond it. We all got out to see what exactly it was, stepping over the log, and noticed 2 narrow trails leading in separate directions. This seemed like as good a time as any to grab our flashlights and do some amateur ghost hunting. We flipped a coin and set off on the trail to the right. The trail was so narrow that we had to walk single file to avoid getting whacked by branches. For whatever reason, I ended up in the back. I'm usually pretty rational and level-headed, but I have to say, the further we went in, the more I was overcome with an uneasy feeling. I kept hearing sounds deep in the woods, unable to shake the feeling we were being watched. But I seemed to be the only one who heard these things, so I shrugged it off as my imagination. And in any case, the whole point of us being there was to get scared. Not to mention the fact that we were 7 able-bodied college students. What would we come across that could take us down? We followed the trail for about 20 minutes, and just when I thought it would never end, we came to a massive clearing. And I mean massive. It was a large open field of unkempt grass, comparable in scope to a golf course, but not nearly as well manicured. Trees surrounded the entire field, which was so large we could not see the end of it from where we were standing. I was thrilled to get out of that narrow trail, but I don't think any of us were expecting to find an area so vast. One of my friends pointed to the right, where there was an old, dilapidated house several hundred yards away. It was completely dark, with no cars or signs of anyone actually living there. We walked over and shined our flashlights at it, and sure enough, the windows and doors were all boarded up. I peered between the boards on one of the windows, and what I could see was an old white couch covered in plastic, but an otherwise empty room. Whoever used to live there was long gone. Because there was no way in, and because we all felt sufficiently creeped out by the house anyway, we decided to walk closer to the trail where we had come from, have a seat in the field, and figure out what to do next. We walked towards that narrow trail, but before we could sit, my friend Mark stopped what he was doing. His expression dropped, and he pointed. We all turned, and on a very far side of the field, directly across from where we had come, we could see someone tall, lanky, and pale dancing among the trees. And by dancing, I mean skipping around, grabbing a tree, swinging around it, and then doing the same to another tree, like a do-si-do. The moon was so bright and the woods so dark, it actually took a second for us to really understand what we were looking at. Jay, the 6'4" skeptic of the group, wasn't seeing it. I leaned into him, pointed in that direction, and said, "Jay, look where I'm pointing, don't you see that?" He squinted a bit, and the second he saw it, he gasped with everything he had, clutched my arm, and whispered, "What the hell is that?" What happened next sent shockwaves through all of us. Whoever it was, they stopped dancing, looked in our direction, and started charging straight at us. Without even thinking, we freaked and ran back to the trail. While the walk into the woods took about 20 minutes, we made it back to our cars, hopped in, and were peeling away in closer to 5. Once we were a safe distance away, we pulled over, got out, and checked in with each other about what had just happened. My heart was pounding, and I know everyone else was feeling the same way. Nearly 15 years later, we are all still friends, living in different states but keeping in touch through marriages, divorces, children, etc. But occasionally, out of the blue, one of us will send a group text to the others with something to the effect of, "The woods. That really happened, right?" And it most certainly did. That experience is always in the back of my mind, and I'm pretty sure it always will be. Here's the thing that still resonates with me about that night. Whoever that was, they were dancing maniacally in the woods at 1 a.m, and then ran directly for a group of young adults, not at all fazed by the fact that they were severely outnumbered. Did he know we were there from the second we parked? Was he the sound that I kept hearing when we walked the trail? Whatever the case may be, when he came for us that night, you can be sure none of us wanted to stick around and see what he was truly capable of.